we have been talking about these for a very long time, is concerning as African universities do have potential to enhance educational quality and relevance in an evolving global landscape. And various studies have argued for the exploration of Afrocentric pedagogies, the integration of artificial intelligence, and the promotion of STEM cognition, multilingualism, and a multilingual and a decolonized educational environment as drivers of Afrocentric universities. Colleagues, I think you are very much aware that in our institutions, what have been there, we've been talking about decolonization. I think after Fields Must Fall, that's what emerged. And in that context we cannot talk about decolonization without talking about the language issues. And of course, we've been talking about these Afrocentric pedagogies. And now we are saying, what then do we do in the context of STEM and in the context of artificial intelligence? So in the projects that we are doing, the aim is to propose a framework for educational innovation that integrates all of these constructs as drivers of an Afrocentric university. Yeah. Okay. Right. So the first one is on Afrocentric pedagogies. So we argue that to achieve an Afrocentric university, we have to focus on Afrocentric pedagogies. But what is the issue currently? The issue is that the pedagogies that we are using in our institutions, they are informed by Eurocentric systems. And one of the colleagues was saying earlier on, we seem to be facing this, this womb that doesn't really produce humanness because it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And these pedagogies still exist irrespective of what we have seen. The pedagogies, for instance, Mwalimu Nyerere's model in Tanzania, the Sankofa model from Ghana, the cultural relevant pedagogies, Ubuntu education, and so forth. We talk about these other ones, the African pedagogies, but what we notice is that in our institutions, we continue to perpetuate the Eurocentric pedagogies. So it's not as if there are no methodologies and pedagogies that are there, but why is it then that we are not really implementing them in what we are doing? And then if you look at the constructs of Afrocentric pedagogies, we're talking of cultural relevance, we're talking of decolonization of knowledge, we're talking of holistic learning, we're talking of interdisciplinarity, we're talking of restorative justice, we're talking of critical consciousness and all of that. And therefore, we then hypothesize that while Afrocentric pedagogies could influence the Afrocentric university, could be stronger if we look from a perspective of the artificial intelligence. Because the argument is, if these pedagogies are there, and on the other hand, we perpetuate the Eurocentric pedagogies, how then can we use artificial intelligence, in that regard? And that is what we want to talk about. So we will explain it.
Okay, so look, essentially what we are saying seems to be couched in this diagram. We could have possibly used this diagram to do the presentation. So let's look at, what is it, the AP. AP essentially is, what is it? Afrocentric pedagogies, right? And we seem to have unpacked it a little bit. So basically what we are saying is that, look, in your mind's eyes, your second mind eyes, forget about these two. Forget about these two constructs. Okay, let's go through this. Let's try and go through this painlessly if we can. Forget about these two constructs. What we are saying is that there are several configurations or several pathways we could follow to arrive at this. Individually, possibly, we could focus strongly on Afrocentric pedagogies that would influence how African universities are seen. One. Two, we could equally look at multilingual perspectives, and that would also have a very direct relationship with what? Afrocentrism. Likewise, decolonization, but these are just direct relationships. The issue is, when we talk of these configurations, do we just have just a simple direct relationship? No, we could make the water a bit murkier, muddier, And that is when we started introducing other variables. So for instance, we are saying that though we do believe strongly, there's literature, there's theory, there's practice to demonstrate that if we refocus our attention on African pedagogies, it is highly possible that we would have a very strong Afrocentric university. But there's a further argument. The further argument is the relationship will be much stronger if we begin to introduce artificial intelligence. That's how artificial intelligence gets in. And you could simultaneously make, is it time already? Okay, good. You could make several arguments along the same line. You could also say that even though we do believe that multilingualism would directly influence this, but we think that if we introduce artificial intelligence, there's a very good chance that we will strengthen the relationship. Now I'm gonna stop here. All of the pathways we see are just the very same argument you take. This entirely is the conceptual framework or the theoretical framework. Now, I'm gonna stop here, use artificial intelligence to demonstrate certain biases that we actually perpetuate, not artificial intelligence. And I'm using artificial intelligence because that is what I predominantly do, you know, or probably IT and STEM. The artificial intelligence business has nothing to do with any particular technology lying there. We develop these models. We use mathematical models, regression models, several mathematical models, right? Introduce data into these models, tell the model to behave in a certain way. Now, the problem with the way we engineer them is this. When we collect the data, or when we feed the model on the basis of our preconceived ideas. That is precisely why these technologies are biased. They are not biased, they are biased on the basis of the person who designed them. So if we don't, all of us, and which is why I've been arguing, my students who, sometimes I teach maths also, my students who actually pursue maths, I teach maths, I tell them there's a reason why you and I as folks into maths, we've got to get into that. But not just that. There's a very good reason why Nukanyo in, what's the specialization again? Language. That's a very good reason why Nukanyo in language has to get into that. There's a very good reason why maybe she's in history, she has to get into that. The key reason is this. If we don't all get into that, the data that is going to be used in modeling, whatever it is, the data will be skewed. And the data is skewed not because the model that is used is wrong. It is primarily because the data that has been used in feeding the model, that's how it generally works. I've simplified it, but it goes further than that. If we don't all get into that, and we leave it in the hands of a few tech giants, right? Few IT, AI specialists, trust me, we would continuously blame them, and the problem would never be solved. And I'm gonna end this by using my very self as an example. I do run lots of artificial neural networks. And I tell you what I do. The very same complaints, unfairness, bias, unjust, so on and so, I do that. And I know it. How do I know it? I collect the data, feed the system, train the system to think in a certain way. And sometimes I don't have time, I'm tired, I just need to go, I need to leave. So I don't train the model properly. The model doesn't respond properly. And eventually what happens? The model becomes biased. These are some of the reasons why we keep complaining that the banks are biased towards us, right? You and I, majority of us live in South Africa, would say some institutions are quite biased towards us. Yes, it's true. It's true because they did not use my data in developing that particular model. That is the explanation. And that explains why we do not have to leave this in the hands of a few giants. And I use the opportunity, that also explains why I like, getting into these particular spaces. So that I use the opportunity to sort of rally and to argue that we all need to be into this particular field. That should not be a preserve of particular AI department or computer science department and so on and so forth. Because once we begin to let them do that, trust me, this unfairness, biases that we experience, discrimination would be structurally infused in the system, and eventually we would perpetuate the very same discriminatory practices that we've been complaining about. So it is up to you right, in different fields to actually be part of the model. When we say model, it could be any form of model. And hence we're saying that, I think from our side, not just Nokanyo is not saying this, I'm saying this. We should be very cautious of looking at this independently. Independently as in, because you are a specialist in decolonization, you stick to decolonization. That's a very dangerous route to take. You can't do that this time. You can't. I can tell you how we can use data to mess people up. That's essential. I mean, we are in that space, and can we do that? Yes. Are we doing that? Yes. Am I doing that? Yes, I'm doing that. We can do that. So you cannot just say you want to stick into decolonization and stick to that. You cannot also say you want to stick into the field of what? Who are those forces? Which other field would you speak of? Yes, which other field would you speak of? Yes, there's so much I can speak about neuroscience and what's the name of it? Craniology. They've used that, the data around that, to mess up the way the thinking of Afrocentric universities should be. And until we begin to unpack all of this also, I think it will be very difficult. That also explains why I argue strongly that we all have to get into this boat. Otherwise, it's going to be a serious mess. I'm going to leave it at that and take comments and questions. Thank you.
Sorry, before we finish, we just want to say, so what we have done, we have designed an instrument that addresses each of those constructs. And that instrument, we intend to actually, distribute it to colleagues, students in the universities, because we want to know what is the current status, what Afrocentric pedagogies are being used in our institutions, and what multilingual pedagogies are being used, and what decolonization strategies are being used, as well as the artificial intelligence constructs and STEM constructs, because we want to know like how this conceptual model is going to look like and how it will then inform an Afrocentric university. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Nokanyo and Prof. Anas. Our next speaker is, you want to have a seat here? Set it up for you now. I'll set it up for you now. Our next speaker, it's, yes, it's a touch, but, okay, just 1 second. No, because if we stop the share, bad. Okay. Hmm? Okay. Find Nova.
Share that one again, yeah. Then you check my file, check my slides. That's not. Check the slides that you found the PowerPoint.
There are.
Then
It's just
that's me. That's me. They must go to share somewhere. Yeah, go back, go back. Let's check that.
again. Is it this one?
Second. Yeah, should be that. Then you go to the slideshow.
Thank you for your patience. Our next speaker is Dr. Our next speaker is Dr. Ayanda Simai from Nelson Mandela University, speaking on techno-Afrocentric praxis as leverage for Afrocentric natural science curricula in higher education institutions.
Good afternoon, colleagues. As you have heard, I am Ayanda Simai. The doctor is by calling or by profession. For those who haven't heard my presentations as part of the ACUSAfrica community, I'm so much into the praxis. How can we take the curriculum and try to put in a decolonizing aspect in the teaching? I use minimal theory to back up the strategies, which are mainly indigenous. And the indigenous knowledge that I know, I use a reference of my own. I am a Xhosa person from the Xhosa culture in South Africa. So I use the culture that I know. At the same time, in my classes that I teach, we teach a diverse community of students. And the community where I go to is diverse. So they share their own perceptions. But I start as a teacher who is trained from the known to the unknown. I think I need to move this on my own. Okay. All right. As I have said that the background is mainly indigenous knowledge, I framed this particular presentation based on the strategy of our institution, Nelson Mandela University. Is what we got after the fees must fall because there was a change from what was done. From our vision 2030, which is the Vice Chancellor's vision, and what we adopted as the university, and then it translates down to the faculties, we have these particular strategic points and principles that we follow. From all of this, my presentation is focused on this, the spirit of Ubuntu. I won't go deep into that one because Ubuntu is a big philosophy, but I take the spirit of Ubuntu under indigenous knowledge systems, respect for diversity, the nature of inclusive education. In this case, it is indigenous knowledge. It is inclusive. It is in our mission statement, social justice and equality. And as we know, as Black people, when I say Black, I mean everybody is not the other color. And we know also that even the white people who are marginalized. Hence, we normally use Black, but we say poor and marginalized, because hunger and financial, social economic status, which is poor, doesn't know any color, but we emphasize those who were previously severely disadvantaged. As I said that my background is science. I'm a science teacher. My life, I've been a history of teaching science for a long time. And knowing that science is very westernized, it's Eurocentric. So you need a way of trying to bring it down to the level of the students. I've taught high school students. I've got 28 years of teaching in schools. I've been a subject advisor managing that before I got into the university. So I know the issues, and I even examined the grade 12 paper for quite some time, moderated and so on. So sciences, when I say sciences, I include them all: physical science, biology, and life sciences and so on, and natural science, which is the entry area for our learners. Then I'm looking at the point of Afrocentrism, taking what I know, which is indigenous knowledge. This is part of my PhD study that I did, but also a paper that I released linking teaching science using indigenous knowledge-based studies, pedagogies, what I term indigenized teaching strategies. Then I say we're taking that as a techno-African praxis, Why do we say so? It's because we have a link that we have done between the use of ICT, simply Teams, Microsoft Teams, particularly during the COVID-19 era. And I've just glanced quickly on the literature on epistemic injustice. This is why you are here at this particular network. Because from our various fields, we agitate about issues of epistemic injustice, social injustice, race issues, marginalization. But what I do it in the classroom. Reflections for people who are on quantitative, you will just bear with me. I have to say I'm so much into qualitative. And in qualitative, that paper was based on my reflections, which went on to be my reflective methodologies and reflective perceptions. Because rather than just saying, I did this and that, there was change, which I want to report here. And then I pose a question. We say, our next generation, we want them to be doing science. Which generation, which future generation? Maybe we will get some answers. The literature that I love using literature from our scholars who are here. I've taken here, for example, this one, Asante, where we have framed one of our main themes on Afrocentrism. What I like about him, it says that a white supremacist curriculum, I've taken out some stuff, does not only harm the students in the universities, but it also degrades all African intellectual ideas and proposes the re-establishment of a colonial and a disorientated regime in the academy. Then I went on to Prof. Su Ming Ku there at the back. He's a philosopher, a sociologist. I'm not there. I chose a paper which talks to me. I shared this a bit about this. She says that universities can be supplemented by cross-site teaching, meaning that different schools which are neighboring, then cross-site teaching elements to deal with epistemic asymmetries. This is what we're experiencing. Find that there is an imbalance. The Western knowledge, Western way of thinking is so dominating as if we have no way of thinking as the African people. This is where, in my own definition and application of Afrocentrism, I center the argument. And then it also supports the issue of, in higher education, reflexively. Because when you reflect, you don't only reflect, while learning towards a more justified, just knowledge reproduction. Then quickly on this one, we should recognize that the university is only one of a number of spaces. It's not the only one, although we're higher institutions of learning. This one is an ongoing process. Decolonization is an ongoing process. And I have already said that we have a long history whose future I'm quickly go through. I'm trying to base my argument, even though it is reflection and reflexive. There's literature, so you don't say it's just coming out of my head. And then without moving so much, Prof. Kiat, one of our founders here of ACUSAfrica in our university, we're attending one session. He was agreeing in a way, though that paper was written then, saying that in the session, decolonization, you cannot say it is done. It is an ongoing process. And there was a conversation amongst us. You will see, I'm looking at my time. Then also, Dina Belugi, the pronunciation of her surname, she will just kill me. She doesn't like, I don't know how to pronounce Belugi. But this is their paper, Ade, Belugi, and Thomas, supporting the use of reflexive methodologies. The participants' lived experiences provide deep insights from within, and then what we say into the misalignment between those discourses that are espoused. I will leave the literature and move quickly. How did we do it? How did I do it? We have some postgraduate students. I think by now they should be asking, what was your methodology? This is my methodology. I said, I'm a teacher, remember? And then I said, I'm using qualitative. And I've put this particular study on phenomenological research design, simply being that it's my own lived experiences. And I had a way of curtailing the bias. I had a subcommittee where I used to report. They were not taking part in terms of reassessing what I'm doing. No, they were listening to my voice. I've done this, I've felt this way. And then how did I do this particular study? Moving from this is what I did with the data analysis, thematic data analysis. Is myself, the lecturer's praxis, framed on the qualitative, is a narrative, presenting an epistemic and a methodological reflexivity. I won't spend much time. I would take you into task if we had enough time. Finally, at the end, what did we get? We got this particular digital indigenized teaching strategy. What really happened here is that I went out, I so much like to tap into schools. I don't like talking here in front of the class. I went into the school starting from grade 7, the little ones. Went into the school, my students were still in the last year of COVID-19, so they were at their homes. So they were linked through Microsoft Teams. So the lesson was live. I was there teaching the little ones using indigenous knowledge to teach sexual reproductive concepts. A disclaimer for communities who don't talk about sexual parts. You see, it is in the curriculum. I had to put it. It is in the curriculum for the little ones. And an experience I had when I was still doing my PhD in India, I got something very funny in the audience because I went into task trying to explain, because you have to deal with issues of menstruation. How do you teach menstruation? What is a vagina? The penis? And you don't just only say the English names, because there are also synonyms where you find that ambiguity. We say, for example, a vagina is a cake. I said, so you're running away because you have to explain to the little one. You are running away. What do you say in your normal language? So that before you move to the English one, because there are double meanings there. So those little ones are used in that particular one for because sexual intercourse is different from fertilization. It's in the curriculum, grade 12, before they go to matric. They should be doing it in grade 9. So for teachers, they fumble because it's tough to talk about sexual intercourse. So I use my culture. We say ukutsiba, jumping over the fireplace. I enacted that and took it into, and the little ones were like, okay, and remember, diverse in terms of color and everything. Some were learning for the first time that in the olden days in my culture, in the rondevals, the mom slept this side. There were no birds more sleeping on the floor. There was a fireplace made, then they bring it inside or make it here. The fire dies down, the mother on the side. When it is the right time, then the father will say, hey, Nozamile, the name of the mother, can you come over? Then the mom, if there are kids are sleeping, you don't jump over the fireplace when the kids are still awake. But if there are no kids, it's fine. So to go on the side of the father, what do? You jump over the fireplace. Ukutsibi ziko. Then it became so simple. And the teacher said, we didn't know that. We had this thing, we thought there's something like ukuhlonipa when you avoid as a married woman in the rural places, you don't name some things. They thought that ukuhlonipa, no, it's not that. It is in the culture, but it belongs so much to the forgotten, because the problem with indigenous knowledge, it is hardly documented. These stories get forgotten. Then Zoom is getting off again. I don't know why. Okay, let me go on. I just don't need it. Now, quickly, as I'm looking at my time, another example, so I moved over. So through that interaction, even from my third years, they said, we can teach this because the truth was that the teacher said, we're not teaching this section because it's too taboo. The kids laugh, but now true, linking these sensitive taboo topics to the indigenous knowledge of a particular nation, then moving from the terms you confront. You're not going to say, "Ukutsibu zika," when writing a paper, from the Ukutsibi zika jumping over the fireplace, you equate it to what? To sexual intercourse, which is different from what? From fertilization. Let me move over. The second aspect which I wanted to show you is frozen. I wanted to show you the pity. As I said that I'm so much into community, I'm not only on sexuality, I can teach everything using, I think it's back with me, I don't know. I can teach almost everything using almost everything. The process of fermentation. When we teach fermentation, people who ask, we're in science, it's anaerobic and aerobic respiration. I had a project which I launched this year in celebration of the Heritage Month. Because here I'm saying that and affirming that when we Afrocenticize our curriculum, then the learners and the students are better able to understand science. Therefore, we support. But for me, as I said, it's the how part. Now in fermentation, we went with a colleague of mine. She is in maths, I am in sciences. A simple process, I think, in every culture, particularly amongst the Black communities, the brewing of mgomboti, traditional beer, sorghum beer, we brew it. Yes. That process is anaerobic. I'm just going to cite one. What we did with Miss Matibabe, she is in maths. I took IK, the closer IK that I know. When it is like you've got that like a porridge thing, before it can start to ferment, you have to cover it with blankets, put it in a warm place, thereafter it is going to ferment. When you go to science, what does that mean? It's the process of what? Of bacterial growth. Remember, when you do these particular IK practical examples, link them to the actual science concepts. So it's the anaerobic, so it's the growth of bacteria. Oh, quickly, then I'm gonna browse through. This one was the evidence. I moved there from my students. These ones, I go out and take pictures. There's no copyright. This is what I want to share with you. This is a project that we have just started. You can see Nelson Mandela, we are always almost on the news, brewing scientific fermentation. So you can see how happy this community. So what I'm bringing to you as I'm wrapping up, let us not be theoretical armchair lecturers. Let us go out there, because the papers we publish don't reach the people whom we want to know. When the community has got a buy-in in what you do, and also your students, they know, like if you're teaching teachers of tomorrow, when you do this in your classroom, they go and teach outside, then the lesson is being spread and spread and spread. But the papers, they fly out there. I'm done. I won't touch the other spot. So as I was showing there that you can teach science, the steps using IK. This is the model I did. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, thank you very much. Our other two presenters, unfortunately, were not able to be here today. So I'd like to invite our three presenters, if they are willing and able, to maybe talk a little more about their research, answer questions from the audience, and we can start a discussion on some really, really interesting and thought-provoking topics. Do you want to just come? You can all, Ayanda, maybe you guys can also cheer. Okay. All three.
That I've got to just respond to. The question could have been answered. Just caution you that the answer I'm going to give you now might vary from what another person would give you. So all I'm trying to say is there are multiple ways of responding to this particular question, okay? I prefer responding to this question through the design perspective. And the question is that how do you, I think he wants to say, how do you integrate local knowledge into AI? Preferably turn it around. How do you integrate AI into? Preferably, that's the challenge and that's the struggle we are in now. So preferably pose that question that way. And if you agree that that's how you pose it down, let me respond to it. So, you see, the problem is this. I think we've got to understand that the AI we're talking of are mathematical models. They are actually mathematical models. They are based on data. And that is why I'm saying the way you pose the question is quite critical. How do we integrate AI into a system? It's rather the better way of posing it. How do we do that? And I'm saying one of the ways of doing that, one of the ways of responding to this question is to look at it from the design perspective. And just briefly, 1 second, sorry, 1 minute, please. You've got to collect the data, right? The data has to speak to a particular need or address a particular need. You use the data, put it in a particular mathematical model. It fails. It predicts it 20% of the time. You do it again. It predicts, it increases 30% of the time, 40% of the time, 50% of the time. So let me stop here. Just arbitrary. Just take any AI, any technology. That's precisely, this is the model it works on. All right. So one, if you feed a system with very bad information, what happens? It gives you very bad response. If I feed the data with only the folks in this sector, what happens? It would always predict information on the basis of us. You understand? And that explains why when you get hold of any of the technologies designed by someone sitting somewhere in East London, it's not East London in South Africa, East London in England, the data tends to speak like them. You understand? That's how it's designed. And what that means is that if I'm in language, if I'm in Uganda, a particular location, and I collect the data will speak to the group of people there. I'll use that and design it. And hence, as I'm saying that the best way for me to respond is to go further back than you would have thought of. Not simply the use of AI, but actually the design of it. And until you understand the dynamics around the design of it, you probably wouldn't even appreciate why you are using that particular data. Or sorry, why you are using that particular technology. So it's a very crucial question. This 2 minutes explanation doesn't suffice, but I encourage that in practice, get involved. And until you get involved, you probably wouldn't also appreciate why we need it actually. Thank you. I hope it suffices.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
Thank you. My question goes to the last presenter. You indicated that your presentation was hinged on Ubuntu, respect for diversity, and social justice, equality. So can you a little bit open up specifically on Ubuntu and how it is anchored there? Number two, and lastly, you talked about in a presentation, when you are talking about the teaching of science, you indicated that there was a need that the Western science is quite so high and a little bit complicated to easily understand. But you said that there was, in respect to Afrocentrism, you would prefer teaching science at a lower level. You say lower level, kind of, there's something I did not understand there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I will start with the first one. My study and my particular paper is not mainly on Ubuntu, but I showed a section of Ubuntu that is indigenous knowledge, because Ubuntu is a philosophy of living well amongst your people, understanding your people, your community, taking their beliefs, their cultures into what you do, a spirit of living together. So it's a broad philosophy. So I took the indigenous knowledge, which has got, but is indigenous knowledge is a subsystem of the broad Ubuntu philosophy, trying to show that the Nelson Mandela University is hinged on those principles that I was showing, and which ones I was able to pinpoint in my main study. Just to go a bit further, I think the first one I've answered, to show how I used, for example, indigenous knowledge. I didn't only stop at saying just indigenous knowledge. I took a theory which in science incorporates both indigenous knowledge and science, knowing that what I was saying is that science by nature, it is predominantly Eurocentric. It is coming from up there, the terminology, they are not that talking about the dictionary, even the manner in which things are explained, they are explained in a Western way. Then how can we then take an African explanation for the same Western science concepts without downplaying them? But we want them to be palatable to the mouth of the African who has got this current knowledge, this cultural practice that he or she knows, but doesn't see a link between it and science. Then when you manage to unpack, as I said in the jumping over the fire, okay, this was done by the old people, it is in my culture, then I can relate this to the scientific explanation of sexual intercourse. Just to go to the theory, the theoretical framework that we use, it was contiguity, argumentation framework. I love the African people. Professor Oguni is coming from here, up here in Africa. In contiguity argumentation, a theory, he's saying that there is a contradiction, as we're saying, between the Western science and indigenous knowledge. It's been there, it is argued. He puts 5 domains. I'll just touch one and the last one. The first one is that indigenous knowledge doesn't want to be suppressed. But because science is brought into the school community, you're teaching learners this, then the Western knowledge becomes dominant, but indigenous knowledge doesn't want to be suppressed. Then there is a conflict between the Western knowledge and indigenous knowledge, because I know what I know in my culture, but I don't know what you are bringing from the West, from the Western side. Then he says, this contradiction, the conflict, is not part of Ubuntu, of our way of living as African people, because we have values, we talk to each other, we settle our differences. As a result, When a learner is faced in class with a conflicting idea, it goes through those 5 cognitive domains until it reaches the top domain, which is equivalence. Equivalence is the uttermost domain where now there is a balance between the Western knowledge and the indigenous knowledge. Like in this example, when I say, for example, it moves from sexuality, take the Mkomboti traditional beer. When I say, when the beer is brewing, and I'm going to test it, you see the ants, they open that container, which is covered by a blanket. And then when you're going to test it, you bring a burning splint, Mosne, a firelight, you bring it closer. Then if it is ready, it's gonna be what? It's gonna be extinguished. If it continues to burn, it means that oxygen is not ready. Oxygen is still being processed by the bacteria, but it burns off. In science, it's what? A test for the presence of carbon dioxide. We tell our learners, carbon dioxide extinguishes a fire from this simple IK fermentation process. Bringing that, they know in their culture, there is now harmonious cognitive balance, equivalence between the indigenous knowledge and the Western concepts, then you move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Prof. Nakanyo and Prof. Anas and their presentation? I don't know if I'm allowed to ask any questions, but I would really love to hear a little bit more about the model that you have designed. I think what really stands out for me in these 2 presentations is the practical implementation of new ways of new Afrocentric pedagogy. We hear a lot of theory. We all know a lot of theory. And I think what's often missing is implementation, practical steps. Yesterday, when the Vice Chancellor spoke about introducing AI into our pedagogy rather than feeling threatened by it, I think that today's session really speaks to how, as Prof. Anas pointed out, how can we use AI in our local pedagogies? How can we find ways to leverage it into our Afrocentric pedagogy? So I don't know if you would be open to speaking just a little bit more about the model that you've used and how STEM and AI fit into those kind of 3 discourses: decolonization, multilingualism, and Afrocentrism, and how the STEM and AI kind of intersect with them. Don't know if, okay. Does anyone else have any questions, comments? Okay.
So the reason why, one of the key reasons why we, one of the key reasons why we draw in a lot from STEM, right? And well, AI invariably is in STEM, but because of the nature of AI, let me just separate it a bit. One of the key reasons why we draw a lot from STEM and AI, and we think that this would make the relationship a bit stronger, is because all around us, virtually everything we do, we draw from science, we draw from technology, we draw from engineering, and mathematics seem to be the backbone of everything that we do, right? So if that is true, and now we're going to make certain premises. If that is true, it could also be true for saying that if we take multilingualism, for instance, which I'm not into multilingualism, we can look at all the constructs of multilingualism, craft data that would be able to respond to issues of multilingualism from the African perspective, use technologies or use mathematical models that would enable us understand them much better. And if we are able to do that cohesively with the mathematical models, it is possible we would be able to link Unfortunately, the diagram is not there. So I'm just taking one pathway. It is possible that given the fact that we use AI, we use maths, we use engineering and so on and so forth, given the fact that we use those particular ideas, it is possible to look at multilingualism within that framework and strengthen the relationship, put together data that responds to it. And if we are able to do that, then it is highly likely that we will be able to achieve an environment that is Afrocentric. That is what we're saying. So another example probably is decolonization. Decolonization or whatever decolonization permeates everywhere, right? So if you look at the sciences, Ayanda just spoke about how the science, there's something that she said, which I slightly don't agree with. There's no such thing like science comes from Europe. No, it's not true. I don't believe even in that completely. But the idea that if you take the entire of science, if you take the entire of sciences, it's been used in a very negative way to present ideas. So how can we now use this very same science to present ideas in a correct way? Statistics is one, data science is one, AI is one. So that is why we are saying that the very same systems that have been used in the colonization process, right, in the discriminatory practices, if we leverage on the same process and draw on science, chronology, right? I wonder how many of you, the other day I was explaining to her, I wonder how many of us here actually know the meaning of Caucasian. If you actually know the meaning of Caucasian, you won't use it. Even the white folk won't use it. How did we get about the word Caucasian? It's psychologists who sat down, collected data, used the data, made certain models, and came out with that particular word, Caucasian. It doesn't exist. In fact, that word does exist, but it has nothing to do with that. It's actually based on modeling, which is why I'm saying that we've got to go back, collect the data, use the data to frame what we want to see and present that, and then that becomes the model, or that becomes the particular AI that we want to see represent us. Until then, we'll always have a problem. Thank you. I'll see you another.
Also, I just want to give you a brief example on multilingualism. I teach a module on multilingualism. So part of this project, we were actually trying to figure out how we can use AI technologies, to teach the module itself. So let me just give you an example. One of the outcomes is basically for students to understand the multiple languages that are spoken around them and around the world. So the AI app that we used in my class was basically the Google Earth. So instead of me standing there and telling them in America, these are the indigenous languages, blah, 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 they took an app, an AI app, went all around the world, found those languages, listened to people speaking in those different languages. And then what was interesting, because we do this multidisciplinary research, so when I sent him the data, and then he asked me, why is it that your students actually went around the world and went to Europe, America, Finland, instead of exploring the African continent and learning about these 46 languages spoken here in Uganda, 52 wherever, something like that. So then when I reflected, just like Andy was saying, because as you use these apps, you also have to reflect, I thought to myself, what view did I actually, impose on those students during my teaching? Did I approach multilingualism from a Eurocentric view? And then when we were speaking yesterday, we were like saying, if you look at the constructs themselves, translanguaging, diglosia, all of that, those are Eurocentric. Multilingualism is approached from a Eurocentric perspective instead of looking at it from our own. Because if you look at my language, Ayanda and I, we share the same language, it's closer. We have so many dialects in that language, but our dialects are not part of the education system. But you find that learners or students understand the concepts from using those dialects. So now we're looking at multilingualism using AI to say, why don't we feed the app and say, these are the other words that are out there. So that if we're talking of access to knowledge, our students can access these scientific terms that Ayanda was speaking about in the languages, that are used in our context. And the AI then apps will enable us to do that. So that is how we're looking into it. So in the instrument, that is when we looked at the constructs and sub-constructs of each of those. And then it will enable us from the data that we collect to understand exactly where the problem is and how then can we come up with this conceptual model that will inform an Afrocentric university. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question.
You. My name is Simon Peter Wawire. Thank you for the presentation. Now, it's not a concern. I would like to, I think, to add in what I've understood. AI, artificial intelligence, what we are all fearing, is dependent on mathematical models. The data we have in Uganda is never utilized. The data we have in Africa, about Africa and our communities, has not been utilized, which was a concern yesterday, that as we are talking about Afrocentrism, we need to be sure that even what we are going to publish will feature somewhere as Africa, right? Now, AI, his contribution, the model they've been sharing, they're saying AI can help us to Afrocentrize our higher education, right? How? Do you give me a minute and I say something? Sorry, Professor Chimoga. I am happy to tell you that I am duly informed about what he's saying, and I want to share my experience. I worked in MTN Uganda for 8 years as an IT engineer. The data we use to market products is fetched from the community. If I access your phone, I will know the website you search on a daily, right? Have you seen that component? I'm now linking that component to the AI part of it, okay? So if I mainly live around Makerere, even my phone will bring an update that you are in Makerere Chikoni. That's the location it will map for me. Now, imagine you have data that you need to consume around here in terms of markets or where you want to maybe fetch information or access services. It will avail that information within that area. That's the purpose of that's the beauty of AI. So when they're doing marketing, they look at segments, different parts of the market, and see what those markets consume on a daily. That's why you will end up getting an advert of the bundle that you normally buy when it expires, right? It is AI generated. I'm trying to make it people. You know, when we talk about IT, we leave many people just in a puzzle. Of course, we think we have made them understand, and we make them understand, but their level is not yet there as we believe it's there, how we may expect it is there. So I'm trying to lessen it down to what I feel my colleagues need to understand. So AI, in an Afrocentric manner, I guess we need to create a database, an African database that will speak to the African requirements. So our repositories, our data that is collected about us, our information, our feeds, because the inputs that we shall put in the system or that we shall feed with the system, when we go to generate information, they will be dependent on what we entered about Africa, about our communities. If she has not talked about her home area and talked about another area, that's what the system will capture and store in the repository. So when we go to fetch the data using AI, it will not talk about that other place. You talk about the other place they mentioned. So AI is intelligent just because we are giving it data. So what are we giving it as Africa? If we don't give it, then it will not produce what we want it to produce. I hope I've made some sense. I'm sorry.
There's two more, and then you'd like to respond?
Yes, my own name is Abraham, the father of faith. I'm a lecturer in the Protestant University in Rwanda. I have not stood up to ask a question, but just to say that your presentation is an excellent presentation, very excellent. The fear I have, if we put decolonization and Afrocentrism, and then we hang on AI as something that is very useful to transmit our data to us the way we want it to be. Is that not in itself adulterating the process of Afrocentrism? That's my fear. It's true. Science did not start in the West. Science started here in Africa. The Egyptian civilization is the hub. But the fact that there is what you call artificial intelligence coming in, something is not selecting well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Dr. Estoken. I want to corroborate what he's saying. I'm from the Delta parts of Nigeria, and I come from one of the minority languages, though I speak a lot of Nigerian languages very well. So some time ago, when I started my PhD research, I went to Wikipedia, and I wanted to know what Wikipedia knows about my people. And Wikipedia didn't know anything. And they were asking me to write. So I'm corroborating what he's saying. They will ask you to write. They will ask you to teach them. It's what you teach them, they will tell the next person who comes to do a research. Thank you.
Forgive me, just for purposes of all of us understanding. When they were launching Google Map in Uganda, they started that project in Makerere University. I did a Bachelor of Information Technology at CIT. So we were the pioneers of that project in Uganda. What they did, they came to Makerere and asked a group of IT and computer science students to participate in the project. Little did we know that what we gave the system is what is happening today. They asked each one of us, then, locate the areas they know from their locality. So I gave Chotera district. By then it was Rakai. I entered the number of sports I knew within Rakai district. And that became the data they depended on then. Of course, they have updated it. They keep updating it. I want just to continue corroborating with the information we shared. So that's how AI, don't fear AI, but how are you going to integrate your thinking and the resources within your area with AI?
I'm going to give Prof a chance to respond, and then Joy.
Look, this conversation can take us a whole day. All I need to say is this. I think we need to be cautious of entertaining the fear towards these emerging technologies. We shouldn't. I can tell you we shouldn't. We have no business fearing them. And let me cite a couple of examples, okay? Kanyos just reminded me of an example I cited yesterday. Before horses, we walked, right? Just a couple of 200,000 years ago, we had all of us converging at Ethiopia. 200,000 forward, look at us, different colors here, right? So we could have come here. A few years later, we had horses, right? And trust me, 200 years ago, the newest technologies then were horses. encourage, right? But a few years later, we had mini cars, and horsemen fought seriously to stop. Just allow me to complete this story. Horsemen fought seriously to stop the newest technology. What was the newest technology? Mercedes with 4 wheels. Those funny things that you see 200 years back. They had to fight horsemen to allow cars. Today, you and I have the luxury of using cars. We don't appreciate it. They had to fight horsemen for over 50 years to allow cars to be that, because it was the newest and most scariest technology. And you know the excuse engineers had to give, the scientists had to give? They went and sat down and did some calculations and realized that actually if I have a car, the amount of work the car could do is equivalent to X number of horses. That's where we got horsepower from. Yes, that's where we got the horsepower from. And can you imagine if horsemen had won that day? Yes. Or can you imagine if horsemen had won within that period? It means I wouldn't have cars. Similarly, artificial intelligence is the same. And let me end it by telling you this. Okay. I said you have no business fearing artificial intelligence, right? And the reason is simple. Regardless of the most complicated technology, and particularly artificial intelligence technology we have, it's as intelligent as not more than 2 months, 3 months year old baby. Why? The most things they do is to imitate. In our growth trajectory, who does more imitation? At what age do we do imitation? Exactly. Exactly. Period. That's the most intelligent artificial intelligence does that. So we have no business, and I'm telling you, in the next 20, 30 years, it will be completely different. We've got to embrace it. We don't have to fear the idea that because we're talking of decolonization, because we're talking of Afrocentric, we cannot embrace. No, we can't. We have to embrace them, leverage upon them, use that to ease our pain. Thank you.
Okay, that's a very positive response. I'm just thinking. Okay, I am both a pessimist and an optimist. And outside of the life of critical education studies or higher education, I'm an anthropologist, right? Trained. And as the head of department at the UFS, there's a woman that I know who is the director of Africa Teen Greeks. Know her for an extended period of time. And I said to her, I'm really excited about the possibilities of creating spaces for my students to do field work in a virtual world, right, as an anthropologist, because we look at immersion. And I had a very similar idea where I went, if I could show you where our forefathers and mothers went and how the trajectory has shifted in terms of the foci, you see more, you experience more, even though it's just visual, right? But we could, and she got excited. And she said, okay, so let's get a memorandum of understanding going. When I tried to get that sorted, and she said to me, ensure that I don't sign with the UFS, right? As an African, we need to maintain power in respect of what we do. So I'm not going to give it to an institution. Where you go, the project goes. So you write that into the document, and it's not appreciated by the powers that be. And now 2-3 years later, our faculty has been told that we need to drop 200 staff members over a 5-year period, making way for STEM. So can you imagine how I'm sitting here and I'm going, you're here. So if it mimics me well, and it follows me on YouTube and it picks up everything,
and it can automate and get very close to producing my voice, I'm out of a job soon. I can be one of those 200 that they get rid of, right? Because we don't always understand, but the institution has copyright over your lectures. So I am all for, right? But I'm also very aware of the context in which we find ourselves in and the kinds of power we need to make decisions that keep us in the loop. And when we are not in the loop as Africans and lecturers and students, it becomes, the tail wagging the dog. Because we don't sit at the decision-making tables. So absolutely, yes. I love the optimism of it. I can see it go in so many directions. But when I recognize also the context of the continent and the various countries on the continent, I am worried.
Thank you very much. That's two quick things I need to say, but the first one is yesterday. There's been a couple of, my head of department is also sitting here, and I don't want to, before she gets me fired, I know she'll fire me virtually. I don't well, the point is that I've been working on a number of projects with Nukanyo, and she recently, you can't say this anywhere, right? She recently told me that I should be careful. I do so many things, I design so many ideas, and would these universities allow me to kind of propagate that? And some universities have agreed that I sort of just share my ideas and go on with it. So that particular issue you are raising is key. She just prompted me yesterday. But I also need to respond to another part of your question, which has been Suleiman. Suleiman is one of the revered folks in AI development. If you look at open AI and stuff, he's one of those guys who is at the forefront, and he seemed to have regretted a lot for everything AI. He's almost like, what's that guy's name, that richest guy? Elon Musk, yes. Those folks are quite regretful for everything AI, everything large language. But this is what I need to say about, we shouldn't be, don't be despaired, my dear. And usually I like speaking and teaching with examples. Before desktop came, we had typewriters, isn't it? You see, and today, I think of us here, yes, of the 20s or so folks here, in the late 90s, early 90s, if they were to give you a desktop, you would have jumped high, isn't it? Desktop. Today, if they give you a desktop, you frown, isn't it? Precisely. So laptop. Actually, if you give me laptop today, I'm not particularly interested because there's an idea in my head. My son likes playing with Roblox a lot, and he works a bit in AI. Sometimes he could have actually done this presentation for me if I'd asked him to do that. Why? The idea is this. I'm hoping that we go past even laptop. I'm saying that pretty soon we should have holograms. Yes. So pretty soon, my argument is that you see me here and us right now. Actually, I should have been in South Africa sitting there doing something, but your interaction with me here is real. Is it possible? On paper, yes. We have the mathematics of it. We have the physics of it. It's possible. We are getting there. In fact, we have, yes. So all I'm trying to say is that whilst we'll be entertaining these fears, but with the decay of time, as we move forward with time, these then become sort of stories like I gave regarding the horsemen and so on and so forth. Pretty soon, trust me, I honestly don't want to spend time going to see a medical doctor. I don't want to do that. I want to take any technology out of my shirt, insert it on the laptop, or insert it anywhere, and it will tell me virtually everything that is wrong with me and prescribe what possibly I can use to have myself fixed.
Um, any other questions or comments? Yes? We're going maybe a few minutes over time, but I think it's very interesting, important. If anyone needs to leave and go get food, you are welcome.
Oh yeah. Thank you, Professor, for the presentation. My name is Moses. Yes, I like the idea of artificial intelligence. I think it is here to stay. So we need to look for strategies to embrace it. But the only reservation which I have, it's in regards to standardization, if it comes here to in Africa. Because Africa, we are a little bit fragmented. You have so many languages. Maybe in South Africa, you have over 50, name it. So like in the process, when you are designing and using models, mathematical formulas, you find that some of the languages are not rich. There are some vocabularies which are missing. So I don't know how we are going to fill that missing match. Then secondly, also currently there is an ongoing trend of globalization or internationalization of education. And you find that currently in Africa, it's gaining shape. We have so many international schools that are implementing more the Eurocentric curriculum, the Cambridge, IB, name it. So you find, and also with the fact that we have democracy where people have a choice, which option they should take. So how are we going to counter this? Because in your presentation, you said the Eurocentric, the approach was to bias us, so as to colonize us, for us to do ETC. Because all this effort which are coming up with in Africa, they're also listening and they're looking for strategies to counter that. So which strategy are we looking towards? Because by the end of the day, you may find that the African approach may be inferior compared to theirs. And even the AI technology which we are using currently, it is their innovation. AI, it's more their innovation. Probably you'll be doing something in the back end and they're seeing what you're doing. Then they look for a stronger option to counter your approach. So that is my liberation in regards to this initiative. But it's a good one, I should say. Thank you.
Second one. Yes, thank you. The second one is difficult. I can't answer it. I don't know it. So I'm gonna take the first one. Look, I'm not particularly sure why we think some languages, particularly in Africa, are not rich. They are not complex enough to be used. No. Quickly, look. Let's take English language that we revere so much. Do you know, have you, those of us in the, I understand in life sciences, and some of us are in physics and maths. Have you wondered why most physics terms are Latin? It's because of the deficiencies of the language, English language itself. Let me give you small statistics here. Actually, almost 33% of English language is French. Are you aware of that? Another 33% is made of some Germanic, ancient Germanic language. Are you aware of that? Have you wondered why Newton and most physics mathematicians actually studied in Latin? Have you wondered why those of us who did maths, you did computer science, so you should be aware of it. Have you wondered why, even though you did not study Greek, right? But you know all the Greek letters, alpha, beta, gamma, right? You know why? It's because English language has just recently been developed. And it is not as rich as we think. That explains why in Arabic, right, most of what we do in science and in mathematics seem to also come from Arabic, because those are some of the languages, foundational languages for mathematics, foundational languages for the life sciences and the physics. So the notion that probably English language is rich, and I think it's a form of delusional reverence we are assigned to. I think that's why I want to stop.
Yeah. Sorry, just to add on that, you know, in South Africa, we have a very good example. Forget about what you associate this language with, but it's a very good example. Remember, it's not the languages that oppress one another, it's what we do with the languages. For instance, the story of Afrikaans in our country is a very good example. Afrikaans was not there. It was not there, but it was created. It's a Creole. And then it was made as it is now as a scientific language. Whenever you type, you can get everything that you want. So even with the African languages, that is where we want to get. For instance, in South Africa, all the institutions were part of what is called the Community of Practice for the Teaching and Learning of African Languages. So what we do, we have now developed a bank system of words and dictionaries, and we are trying to, sorry, I didn't realize I was sitting down. Excuse me. We are trying to actually build this terminology, you know, in everything that we do. And I'm not saying of it theoretically, I'm saying it because I'm the deputy chair of that community of practice. So that's what we're doing for higher institutions, because it aligns with the language policy, the new one, the 2020 language policy of the country for higher education institutions. So we are getting there, and what we do now, our students, they write their proposals, they write their PhDs in isiXhosa, like in my language, that's what we do. We publish in isiXhosa. I was saying to Anna 3 days ago, there is a project that we were presenting on the issue of literacy in African language cognition. And I was saying to him, let's collaborate with other colleagues who are isiXhosa, like African language, you know, specialists, and let's turn that into a special issue in isiXhosa. We will be giving up this terminology of AI and science and everything, and we are writing it, we're putting out there, we will publish in our language. That's what we are trying to do. So it will take us as individuals to get this going. Without us, it cannot be there. So that's what we want to do.
Colleagues, let me latch on something the colleague said earlier on. And I'm going to use another example again. 1500, there was a very deliberate act going on. And I hope you now begin to wonder why. We have something we call linguistic purge by the Spanish. Again, do you wonder why there was a linguistic purge by the Spanish, which was poorly done, but mastered by the Portuguese? And this is, I'm going to explain to you quickly. In the 1500s, it became a big issue that the Spanish had to embark on that particular exercise. Why? Because almost 80% of Spanish words, you know, are actually Arab words. So they had to de-Arabize Spanish words. Unfortunately, they did it poorly. That is why still those of you who speak Spanish, and you can trace the etymology of the words, they actually come from Arabic, they're actually Arabic words. The one group that did it well was actually the Portuguese. And I'm trying to paint a picture that the notion that African languages are not rich, it's a very delusional idea. A delusional idea to prevent you from being able to put together your own work. I teach my math students, and usually I tell them, you don't have to go too far to be able to write mathematics and physics and life science in isiXhosa or Zulu. You don't have to. And they open their eyes so wide. And I said, even if you don't know the template, the Afrikaners have done it. So why don't you use the very same? You can teach from zero to Stellenbosch Medical School in engineering in Afrikaner, right? Why don't you use the very same templates? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Please can we give our 3 presenters another round of applause? I just want to end off by just making 2 very brief comments. Firstly, as social scientists, I think it's unnerving to enter a session where everybody's talking about STEM. And well, I certainly was caught off guard by all the conversation about science and STEM. But I guess what I managed to get out of it is that even the the objective subjects that we study are as socially constructed through language as anything that we study in our social sciences. And one thing that comes through very strongly is that the role of language, of local language in shaping new reality. And I think that's where social sciences come in. We have all the theory about the turn to language and discourse that we can put to practice really usefully in thinking about how to Afrocentrize our universities, because it really is one of the foundations of knowledge, the way that we talk, the language that we use. So I guess what I wanted to say is thank you for bringing this really, really important topic into the room. Many of us are afraid of AI in the same way that many people used to be afraid of horses and carriages and cars. Cell phones. It's a new phase, and we have to, as our presenters have suggested, try think of ways to incorporate it into Africanizing knowledge, encouraging contextual and local knowledge rather than assuming it's a Western kind of concept and leaving it aside. So yesterday we were encouraged by the VC and by the Deputy Minister to have fruitful deliberations. I think today has been a very fruitful deliberation. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.